of our bi-weekly this is one of our bi-weekly information sessions about the worldwide teach-in on climate and justice, or Worldwide Climate and Justice Education Week, set for the first week of April in 2024. My name is Eban Goodstein, and I am an economist and direct the graduate programs that focus on sustainability at Bard College in New York, who is the host of the Worldwide Climate Education effort. And we're pleased to have Tobias Hess with us today to talk about his how he's coming at this work as a youth climate activist. And I want to just preface this today with, this war in Israel-Palestine has obviously dominated the headlines for the last few weeks, and rightly so. These kind of events, war in the Ukraine, war in the Middle East, makes it hard, I think, to focus on issues like climate change. It makes it hard. The headlines disappear. We all have only so much mental bandwidth to kind of think about global issues, and yet there were two headlines that I wanted to emphasize today. One was that Mexico just this morning got hit by a Category 5 hurricane, a direct hit on Acapulco, and we don't yet know the damage. And it was one of these superstorms that are unprecedented, right? It spun up to 100, went up to 100 miles per hour in like 24 hours, which has never essentially been seen before. And the other story was about the fires in Canada last summer. They're still just barely concluding. And the headline that stuck in my head was that half of the countries in the world could fit into the area that was burned inside of Canada, just in terms of geographic area. It was massive, 6 times the level of fires that the country's experienced ever before. Essentially the country is burning down. So when people press me on climate change, why do I work on climate change? The issue in the Middle East is, it's a 70-year-old war, and it's not going to be, what as a consequence of what's happened last month is that war is going to extend out even further into the future than we probably imagined. The prospects for peace are now even dimmer. So these are the kind of issues that humans work on over the course of centuries, right? Reducing war. But climate change, we have decades. We have 2 or 3 decades to make a real change in the future. And of course, the good news is we can make a change. We're on the cusp of moving beyond this sort of deadly fossil fuel world, which, by the way, is the driver of both this war, the funder of this war, certainly, and the funder of the Ukraine war. So we have the chance to move on to a different world in the next few decades. And so that's why I spend my time working on climate change when there's so many other things in the world that I could be working on. So I just felt like I wanted to say that today to kick this off. And now I want to turn it over to Tobias and sort of give us his perspective as a young man. I just gave you my perspective as an old man.
Hi, everyone. Great to be with you this morning or afternoon, depending on where you are. My name is Tobias Hess. I work with Worldwide Climate and Justice Education Week, and we're here to talk about centering youth in climate activism and climate education. We're going to share a little bit more about our initiative. But to start, I'm going to tell my own story of coming to climate education and climate activism from a very kind of non-traditional lens. And the hope is that by sharing my story a little bit, maybe it'll relate to some of people who are here, and then we'll go towards what the initiative is and kind of how it relates to my story, and maybe it will inspire some folks and get us thinking about ways to engage your institution on climate education. So I'm going to share my screen. Can we all see this? Eban, can you see that?
Oh, yes, got it.
Okay, great. So like I said, we're here with Worldwide Climate and Justice Education Week. And I'm going to tell a little story, my own story, and I'm going to take us back to 2018 when I had similarly big hair. I guess that's the morning, so I have that head. But this is me in 2018. I was a freshman in Bard College. I'm from Los Angeles. Bard, for those of you who don't know, is in upstate New York. Maybe you could tell by my demeanor in this photo, but I was kind of a brooding artist. I was interested in writing and music, and I've always been political, but certainly not involved in climate or sustainability formally, and that was not my path. I was entering in 2018, and many of you will remember a report that came out in 2018, the IPCC report, that detailed how the the trajectory that we were on as a planet. Um, I saw that this report came out. I don't know what compelled me to read it, but I was really shocked and disturbed when I did so. I was seeing details of a frankly unlivable future, and I was not seeing much evidence that we were on any sort of trajectory to change course from that. 2018 was a very different time. We had a different president, a different political moment. And I was just deeply, deeply anxious and couldn't concentrate on anything in my schooling after reading that. I was doing music and writing, but that all frankly felt sort of unimportant when I was thinking about the future we were looking at. Yeah, this is the New York Times article that I read in addition, and it just all became very stark and distracting. I really could not concentrate in my classes or do much of anything. So I was sharing these feelings with a dear friend at the time, and she said, "Hey, I'm going to DC. We're going to do a sit-in in the Capitol for climate action. I don't really know what it is, but join me." Um, so I decided to join her. I had family in DC. I went over there. That action ended up being the launch of the Sunrise Movement and the launch of the idea of a Green New Deal. For those of you who are not familiar, the Sunrise Movement is a youth movement that advocates for a Green New Deal, which is essentially a big government policy to decarbonize the American economy while ensuring justice throughout the process. I was learning about it as I got my poster, but I was around all of these people who were so passionate, had such a clear vision. This was in the US Congress on the first day of the new Congress. There was the new Democratic majority in 2018. And we were there to demand that the Democrats prioritize and center climate in this new Congress. It ended up being extremely newsworthy. I don't know if anyone's seen me in this photo yet, while you've been looking at it just now, but this is in the New York Times, so this is forever in the textbook, and I'm associated with it, and I'm proud to be so. But we were joined by AOC, and it was her first day in Congress, and she joined us for the sit-in. The sit-in was actually in Speaker Pelosi's office, so it was this big moment of tension within the Democratic Party and within the rising progressive movement. We were in the New York Times on every major cable news show. And this kind of just started me off on this completely new trajectory that I was not intending to be on. I was, like I said, I was a writer and artist. And all of a sudden, I was a professional lobbyist for the Green New Deal. I was talking to politicians. I was lobbying in Albany. I was organizing protests. I was meeting other activists, talking to different Democratic committee groups, trying to get them to sponsor ideas. And throughout this whole time, I was still using the skills and passions that I already had, which was primarily writing at the time. I was writing speeches, I was writing, organizing calls to action. And this kind of just set me up on this whole new journey I really was not intending to go on, but I was driven towards with because of my concern and anxiety for the future. That led me to an internship with the Climate Reality Project, which is a nonprofit started by Al Gore, where I was their youth engagement intern. And throughout this whole time, again, developing my skills, using the passions I already had. And then when it was time for me to graduate, 4 years after I was part of that protest, Eban emailed me and asked me if I wanted to come on to this project. So I share all of that because I'm just going to skip over this part. this is something we talk about often in our work. This is something that Eban says often. So solving climate requires all of us, not just climate experts, but everyone, no matter their discipline. We need climate artists, historians, chemists, and economists. We all need to start talking about climate. And inadvertently, I sort of embodied that experience. I was a writer, but I became, in a sense, a climate writer. And the skills that I gained in the climate movement then led me towards my own professional development, towards becoming a better writer that I can then apply to the climate movement and beyond, and other sorts of writing, which I still pursue. So that's kind of the crux of our work, is trying to engage students on interdisciplinary climate work, be they an artist, a chemist, in the social sciences, the arts. Everyone has a place in the climate movement, just as I did when I was just a writer in 2018. So we're going to talk more about our initiative, how you can join and kind of engage your students, if you're a student, your fellow students, if you're an educator, the students that you work with, how they can become part of the climate movement from their own disciplinary perspective. Eban's going to share more about that through our initiatives, Make Climate a Class or Make Climate an Event. And then we're going to circle back and I'm going to share some climate education resources that you can use to do that and engage students from all different backgrounds, not just those who are in a sustainability program.
Thanks, Tobias. And before I jump back in, I'd be good to see if anybody has questions or thoughts they want to share, what their experience has been as a climate activist, how they're feeling right now about being a climate activist in a time of war, or anything else. Does anybody else want to, youth among you, not Jeff Scales, another old guy like me, but anybody else want to offer up some thoughts? Anything in the chat or want to step forwards? Okay. Well, let me talk, and of course, feel free to put your messages in the chat or interrupt my talking today. But yeah, as Tobias said, we're trying to do the work where we live, right? And for you all, that's presumably in and around campuses. And at the end of the day, we have to figure out how to get everybody talking about climate solutions, because that is the first step. We don't talk about climate solutions, then we're not going to drive them. And that's everybody, not just the 20 students or so on campus who will typically show up for a climate event, but how do we really engage the whole community? And so I will share my screen now and give you, if Tobias will let me, and give you a real quick overview of kind of the work we're doing. So this is our website, though, for the Worldwide Climate and Justice Education Week. And our tagline is, the biggest threat to our future is thinking that someone else will lead, that someone else will solve the climate crisis. So we're really looking to you to be leaders, but also the reality is that with events like what's happened in Canada last summer or Mexico right now, at every college, university, high school in the country, in the world, there are increasing numbers of deeply climate concerned people, faculty, students, staff, and not climate experts, not people who do this for a living, but just normal folks who are teaching, European history or geography or anthropology or, chemistry 101. And so how do we get them talking about climate change? How do we also get the students who are, I think in many cases very aware of climate change? They don't need education about the reality of it, but they're really in despair. And they don't see what they can do about it. So why would they even bother to sort of learn more about it? How do we move them from a mindset of despair to a mindset of repair? Right? We've done a lot of damage to the climate, and there's a lot of repair work to be done. There's no magic bullet. This is the kind of a lifelong kind of endeavor where we do everything we can every day to repair the climate. Whether that's our individual choices in terms of eating less meat or flying less, or, you know, it's our commitment, you know, to become climate artists or psychologists or economists um, or scientists or lawyers or business people, you know, who are like building in work on climate solutions into their professional lives. And obviously the work we do as voters and activists and protesters. So the event is set for that first week of April. There's plenty of planning time. And we're really asking organizers to do two things. The first one is to make climate an event. So this is some kind of on-campus event that engages lots of folks and not just the 20 people who are going to show up for that climate talk or that climate movie. And we have lots of examples, if you click through that Make Climate an Event button there, about how to do that on your campus. It can be very creative. It can range from, you know, theater performances, and we have some great short plays that theater groups can perform, to gatherings organized by faith communities, to panel discussions, to films and movies, to sit-ins, protests, marches, whatever makes the most sense for your campus. And ideally, you know, you're drawing together a team of 5 or 10 people who can, you know, do multiple events so that it really becomes a climate week and not just a climate day. So that's the first thing. The second thing is we want to figure out how to mobilize all of those increasingly climate concerned faculty to get them to make climate a class. And by that, we mean we want that European history professor or that Chem 101 professor to take a half an hour during climate week, climate education week, and just say, hey, you know, this is a normal chemistry class, but I'm going to spend half an hour, 45 minutes talking about how chemists are working to solve climate change and how what you're learning in this class relates to climate solutions. Or, you know, I know I'm teaching European history, but today we're going to talk about how historians have been rethinking history in the light of climate change and thinking about how major climate changes in the past have affected human events. Or you're teaching studio art and you say, okay, we're going to take a break today and look at climate art and how artists are responding to climate change. So the idea here is if you get 20 or 30 or 40 faculty on your campus to make climate a class, then you're touching 600, 700, 800 students, right? Through that kind of activity. And students in particular can be very powerful drivers of this, because if I was a teacher and I'm teaching Econ 100 and I get, you know, 3 emails from students asking me to make climate a class, I'll go, that's an interesting idea. And you know, I want to be responsive to what students are concerned about. So yeah, I'll do that, right? I'll overcome my fear of trying to teach about something I don't know about, or fear of being too political, and I'll make climate a class in my econ class. So students can be really powerful drivers of that. And I know, again, everybody's busy. We've got incredibly lots going on in our lives, but this is the moment, folks. This is the hottest year that humans have ever experienced. And we don't want to keep saying that year after year after year, right? We don't want, you know, 1/10 of Canada burned down this summer. We don't want 20% of Canada burned down 5 years from now. So there is no better time. There's nothing better to do at your university or college or high school than to do this kind of work. So let us know how we can support you. And now I'm going to turn it back over to Tobias to take us through some of our resources. But let me stop before we do that and just again see if there's any questions, ideas, comments, thoughts, you know, why this is too hard, why I can't do it, why it would be fun, why I can do it. Anybody have any questions for us? I know there was an earlier question about funding. We don't really have much funding for this, unfortunately. If you're involved in an OSUN university, we have some small mini grants, but in general, this has got to be the kind of thing you're doing on your own. There is typically, and Tobias can talk about this, budget through um, universities for student activities, and you might be able to tap into those funds. We are not particularly connected to UNESCO ESD. Okay, Tobias, back over to you.
All right, great. If you can just stop sharing your screen.
Okay, you can probably override me, but let's see. How do I stop sharing?
Okay, I did it.
Yep.
Oh, and we have a question, even maybe we can speak to about the HBCU Climate Change Conference.
I've never heard of that. So yeah, can you send us a link? Or I can Google it probably, but would be great to learn about that.
Wonderful. And we can send after, we've worked with institutions around the world that have done really creative climate events. Howard did a large one last year. So happy to share those details. I'm going to share my screen. So just quickly to make this a little bit more concrete, what is a climate event? What is a climate class? We're going to just show a few different resources, and then maybe we can have a little bit more of a open conversation about those resources and how this can happen. So on our website, which I put in the chat, but we'll also send in follow-up, we have these different examples of kind of climate events that we've had partners do around the world. We've had over 500 climate events in the past few years. We used to be the teach-in, so that was around a focal date, March 29th. Now we're the week. But really inspiring examples. This is in Bangladesh. They built communally a zero carbon bamboo structure. In Kyrgyzstan, we had a large engagement with Climate Fresk, if anyone's familiar with that. So really all over the world, really inspiring examples. Our kind of key model is an interdisciplinary panel that engages the whole institution because you have folks from all different types of disciplines. But really encourage you to check out these examples and get you thinking about what kind of creative climate event you could do in your school. Those aren't exactly resources, but more so kind of spaces for inspiration. Our key resource for folks who are interested in possibly pursuing in-class, Make Climate a Class from a different disciplinary perspective. Our key curricular partner is called Subject to Climate, who's a really, really powerful resource that we're really proud to work with. Essentially, it's a climate lesson plan database. So here's their website. We'll send this after. Here's the resource database, and you can see these are all climate lesson plans, and you can search them by subject. So you're an art teacher, you can look at art. I'll just stay on that because it's interesting. By grade, so we have, K through college, standards, language. There's really a lot of different ways to kind of search your climate lesson. And you can just use this and, copy and paste this lesson plan in your class for your Make Climate a Class initiative, or you could use this as kind of a base to think about what sort of things you can talk about in your, from your discipline, from your perspective. So Subject to Climate, this is a really, really powerful tool. But we also have many other kind of climate education resources. So we'll send this after. So we have Subject to Climate, but on our page, we have climate games, different websites that we recommend that are powerful tools to get started, the Climate Stories Project. So really encourage you to look at our resources. We have these write-ups of all these different kind of climate education resources. So you can kind of survey what might be the best fit for you and your institution. We're looking at the higher ed right now, but we also have secondary schools and primary schools, depending on what your institution type is. yeah, so Subject Climate is our main kind of curricular partner, but encourage everyone to check out these. And now I think it'll be great to just have a more open conversation about these two initiatives.
And while we're waiting for folks to jump in, I mean, just I would say never underestimate the power of bringing people together in these kinds of events. So I'll tell you a story. I'm old enough that I remember the first Earth Day in 1970. I was 10 years old. I was in fifth grade. And I remembered it was that because they had us do a poster. And so I remember when I was 10, I made this poster of this factory with like smoke coming out, and it was forming a skull and crossbones. And did that have an effect on me as a young person? Well, yeah. I mean, here I am 50 years later, and I'm organizing a global Earth Day. So, the power of bringing young people together with an inspiring vision, giving them the opportunity to talk, to engage, really can have long-lasting impacts. And so, this is an education initiative. We're not calling for anyone to any specific change in the world. We're just really trying to get people to change their mindset, right? And open up the possibility of a good life lived working on climate repair, and the different ways that you can do that. Any questions for us?
And I encourage folks, if you're comfortable, to ask your question off, on the mic, so we can have a conversation, or turn on your video. Yeah, Seema.
Oh,
Oh, you're muted.
yep.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. I'm from India. And my question is that this climate week that you are arranging in April, if we collaborate with you, so will it be online, or is it going to be in person?
So there will be some individual events that are online, but really it's decentralized in the sense that it's individual institutions and individual organizers and teachers all around the world organizing their own climate event or climate class around the same time. So there's not one kind of week or one central event. It's many, many different events. So last year we had over 300, and we reached around 50,000 students for our teaching. So it's a similar process this year. To join, all you have to do is just sign a pledge, and then we'll be in touch with these resources and be available to help you in your planning.
Okay.
Awesome.
So for participation, there must be a fees for the institution, or for individuals separate?
So it can be, sorry, can you can you just say the question one more time? I lost you for a moment.
For participating in this event, you'll be charging and then we get the resources, or is it going to be a free participation in the conference?
Free participation. All you have to do is just pledge. I can send the pledge right now, and then you'll be receiving emails and follow-ups from us with these resources, and we'll also be available to help you. But completely free, your own organizing that we support, and then you'll be part of a global network of educators around the world. So we have a large group of climate educators who are all good community working on this together.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, Kamakwa.
Hello, how are you?
Hi.
How are you?
I'm receiving a kind of a strange sound. Oh wait, it went away.
Yes, I get
Or sorry, I
Yeah,
think there's some problems with your.
You can't get me.
Yeah, would you please write your question in the chat? Sorry about that.
Okay.
Sorry about that. Anyone else while we don't come up with a question. Anyone else have any questions or thoughts? Want to go off mute or turn on their camera?
Well, thank you all for being with us today. I want to kind of, and while we're waiting for more questions, kind of emphasize next steps. So Tobias, if you let me share my screen again, that would be great. So let me do that. Okay, so really we're looking for right now, if you want to be part of this project and you know that you want to do something on your campus, what you need to do is pledge to make climate an event. And the way you do that is you go to that pledge link right there, and it will give you the opportunity right here, click to host, right? And then you just, let us know what you're going to do. You don't actually have to have any actual events lined up yet. You can go back and edit this, but we need to get you in the system. We need to know that you're interested. So this is the place to go. Please sign up and demonstrate your commitment to hosting an event sometime of some kind the first week of April next spring. So that really is our big ask today, is to on your own or with a friend or two to make a commitment to doing some kind of event as part of Worldwide Climate and Justice Education Week on your campus. And do we have any other questions? Got a question from Shivam.
Yeah.
Hi, firstly, thank you guys so much for hosting this event and sharing your insights thus far. It's been very interesting. I was just wondering if you could share any thoughts you may have about larger institutions such as museums and libraries responding to the climate crisis, as they are in a similar vein to higher ed institutions, educational, and their audience reach is quite larger.
We are working with a variety of communities, and in particular art museums. We have a connection with an organization of art museums that have been part of the teach-in and will be part of the Climate Education Week. But this is not really our primary audience because we have a difficult time doing outreach to them. We're more focused on universities, colleges, and high schools. I think it's the fair. Tobias, anything you want to add to
that? I think that's our primary audience is universities, but I'm going to share our 2023 report. Like I mentioned, we reached over around 50,000 students, and there are a number of museums. The Museum of Indian Arts in New Mexico was a partner, and I think there's a lot of inspiring examples. Yeah, so I think more so looking towards these examples could spark some ideas of ways to engage. I mean, certainly there's like a deep history and community of artists engaged on the climate crisis. So really our work is just asking for one kind of key organizer to take initiative and see if they can engage their institution, be that a university or a museum. Eban, anything else to add to that?
I think that's pretty much it. Yep.
Yeah, thank you so much for the question.
Thank you.
And Jeff is giving a climate presentation at an art gallery next weekend. That's fabulous, Jeff. And good, Tobias. You want to? It looks like we're winding up here. Do you want to take us out?
Sure. Yeah, I was just gonna briefly also share. I was thinking about we worked with Alyssa Singer, who's from Climate Graffiti, that does these kind of abstract renditions of climate graphs, and that have actually become the art for the IPCC report. So I'm gonna put her website in here, and Shivam, if you want us to connect you with her, she's a really interesting and inspiring person. So please feel free to email us. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, there is tremendous work going on in many, many sectors, and this is really this is an initiative that's really primarily focused on mobilizing students and educators around the world to speak up and to talk about climate change. I like to think about this analogy of kind of education, engagement, talking. When I was in college in the early 1980s, the AIDS crisis was just emerging, and we didn't actually, literally, when I was in college, we didn't know what AIDS was. It was the early 80s. But soon after I left college, some of my friends contracted it and died of it. And so AIDS activists had a saying that silence equals death. Because at that time, AIDS was a very stigmatized disease and people were not willing to talk about it. And of course, if people didn't talk about it, nothing would be done about it and people would die. And I think the same thing holds today for climate change, right? That climate silence equals death. And so we need to get everybody on our campuses talking about climate change. And in a way that is focused on not just how big a problem it is and how it's going to damage our future, but what we can do about it. So this is really that opportunity. It's how do you get your fellow students, your teachers, your staff talking about climate change. So we want to again sort of urge you to sign up, because at the end of the day, really what motivates people to get involved in this project is seeing this map. And this is the map from last year. And you can see over 350 colleges, universities, high schools around the world. As you sign up, other people want to sign up. They want to be part of the project. So please do plant your flag, get your bubble on the map, so we know you're participating and others can see that you are stepping up to lead. So that's really our primary ask. And of course, we're here every 2 weeks. If you want to bring other people next time to learn more, we'll be back here in 2 weeks with actually the very well-known climate leader, Bill McKibben, will be with us 2 weeks from today at noon Eastern. So please consider joining us then and bringing colleagues and friends to that call. Tobias, anything else you wanted to add?
No, thank you everyone so much for joining us this morning or whenever it is in the day for you. I've put the pledges to join in the chat. We'll also send them in a follow-up email. But really just putting in your information is the first step, and you'll be in our system and we could be available to you to help you plan your climate event, your climate class. We've reached tens of thousands of people before. We'll do it again, and we'd love to have you part of this global network. And we're here to help. So putting my email again. Feel free to reach out. We're happy to meet with you, happy to help you. And we really thank you for taking the time today.
Yeah. Bye-bye, everybody. Stay in touch.
Deja. Okay, I will close the meeting.
Okay, bye-bye.
See you at 12. Bye.
Okay.